You're about to hear the recorded audio diaries of Michael Swaim, Adam Ganzer, and Abe Epperson, transmitted to you from another dimension through the wonder of podcast technology. Lost in the multiverse, they have to dig into a different piece of multiversal fiction each episode, in the hopes of finally discovering a way back to their reality. How do they know this isn't their reality? Because one of them is being a real asshole. Will our heroes ever make it home, or will they inadvertently explore our obsession with multiverses, alternate timelines, and parallel worlds, and tie it all into a conversation about postmodern art, pop culture, and what it means to be a human right now? This is Escape from the Multicurse.
Please! That's mine. Adam, you do yours. We're all gonna do it. It's best.
Please!
That's not bad.
Please!
That one...
Not good.
Just the up lilt at the end made it sound a little more pathetic and like desperate.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
That's the saddest
I
one.
had that on you guys, but none of us can do the.
No. Not like the guy whose name no one knows, and I forget already, even though I looked it up, who played the titular character in the movie we're covering today. You know the premise because Tom Ryman's voice explained it in the intro. I'm not doing it, Adam. I refuse to do it anymore.
No, I don't think you should.
Yeah.
I
I'm
don't think you
Michael
should do
Swaim. That's Adam Ganzer.
Yo.
And we also got Abe Epperson here. Say hey.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Abe.
And on this show, we dive into movies that depict some kind of interconnected multiverse or intersecting realities. And today, you guessed it, it's Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a noir, which I know Adam will enjoy.
And I sure did. I do enjoy it.
And a thing where a
did.
human kisses an animal, which I know Abe has a thing for.
Yeah.
It's something for
Yeah,
everybody. It's something.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'll just say right out the gate, I mean, Adam, you said you had some stuff to say about this movie.
Yeah.
I had way more than I thought, but I'll start with just generally saying I love it.
Yeah.
It is thoroughly delightful and maintains its magic to me. It is really a special movie, almost in the way Princess Bride is, or a couple other just like, wow, that holds up in terms of how fucking delightful it is. And the older I've gotten, the more I've gotten into filmmaking, I only appreciate it more because at the time it was made, and we'll get into some of the specifics, the practical effects in this, like the concept that, hey, we're going to pull this off, was both a legal nightmare, which I think will be interesting to discuss IP-wise, and like a marvel of craftsmanship in terms of compositing the animation with the live action. What are your thoughts, Adam or Abe? Someone jump in.
Well,
Like
I don't want
first
to say.
blush
I'll
shit.
go first.
Yeah.
Sure.
My impression, it is better than I remember it being. I've never loved this movie because Roger Rabbit actually as a character has always been a little irritating to me. But
That's fair.
Now that I'm older, I actually kind of appreciate him a bit more. It's really fun. It's a fun movie, and it does have a lot more implications than almost any movie that I can recall watching. Like there's so many like tendrils of consequence spiraling out from this idea. Also, like you know how there's like filmmakers that are like they belong to an era because they have the tone of that era. I feel like that's Zemeckis in the 80s.
It's a crazy time capsule. That's what I kind of meant.
Yeah.
It's so specific of the time.
And Zemeckis, and also to a lesser degree, the guy who did RoboCop, whose name flew right out of my head.
Verhoeven?
Yeah, Verhoeven. Those two guys, to me, like represent that kind of maniacal, gleeful thing that was in a lot of 80s movies. Those guys really, they really nailed it. And I think this movie is a great version of it, which is why it sort of holds up, because it feels like a time capsule. I'll say more about the multiverse piece of it momentarily.
For
but
sure.
Abe,
Yeah. I just wanted first blushes before we get on track.
Yeah. For me, I think you kind of mentioned it. There's a lot of technological marvels and impressive craft in a lot of movies. But this movie, with its attention to detail and kind of meticulousness in its design, will go down in history as the movie that I first made it with a lady.
Oh.
It was the summer of 2002. And I had my friend Rachel Jorgensen over to my house while my parents were in Moraga, California, visiting with my aunt and uncle. And the last few weeks of my relationship with Rachel had become more flirtatious, culminating in a brief kiss 2 days before in the hallway to the bathrooms of the local arcade/skate rink. And while at my house, Rachel and I discussed what movie to watch while our youthful loins became excited with anticipation.
Youthful loins.
The Godfather 2, Galaxy Quest, and Rachel hadn't seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And after telling her, oh, you got to see it, it's great, I pulled the VHS tape from its sleeve and proceeded to inject it in the player. And within 5 minutes of the film's opening, we were pounding each other, much like Roger pounds his head in the wall while being electrocuted not 3 minutes into the film. And for these reasons, Who Framed Roger Rabbit and this is in a class of its own, unique and perhaps unrivaled to this day.
I don't know what it would mean to rival that.
Because you got your dick wet?
Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Truly a memorable film.
Yeah,
Sure.
I would imagine.
Sure.
What did I watch while losing my virginity? Nothing. I focused on losing my virginity.
It's incredible that that's a connection we have to make. I'm just wondering, are we going to have to like get play-by-plays of what you were doing to like line up the time code of this movie? Like, you know what I mean, Abe? Like, or were you able to?
That's what
keep
I was
one eye
scrolling
on
through
it?
the synopsis to try and
Yeah.
keep you honest about whether it was truly 5 minutes in.
Yeah.
So we'll need to know like
3 minutes in.
when
And it
you
is.
came and what scene was on at that point. 3 minutes in is like still there's a baby on screen.
Right.
Abe. I'm
Yeah.
disgusted by you, sir.
Yeah.
We were
Almost falling on
teens
knives.
after
We were
all.
teens.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into format and shake that off.
What a cool fact that was.
What a cool fact.
Yeah.
We'll learn more about each other and the multiverse as an artistic concept in mapping the multiverse.
Yeah,
I don't
or
even
the
give a
multi
shit.
the
Something like
multi
that.
map.
The multi-map.
The funniest thing about this argument that we're always having about this is you and I have switched places. You are always doing the version I said we should do, and I'm always like the one you should do. Yes,
I'm consistently, I know what I believe. Well, or maybe I'm wrong, but what I think in this present moment, I've always consistently believed is that how does this movie use the concept of the multiverse? Because that's what I'm interested in.
That's right. Agreed.
Okay, great. All right,
agree
then
on
we're
that.
great. Well, since I'm already ranting and it's quick, I think the most interesting way this movie uses the multiverse now, obviously, I mentioned legality and IP. One way is in a way that we've covered before, and that's why it's less interesting to me, which is the Avengers way. And it's interesting. I think it's an important movie in that way. This is the only movie ever in the history of man to have a legally sanctioned by all sides with a contract shot of Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse together.
Yeah, it's cool.
And that's Avengers shit like so early on in terms of what it took to make that happen. And I think that's interesting, but less interesting because Avengers also, like we've talked about it, but a way that this uses the multiverse that I don't think we've discussed yet that is an interesting screenplay trick to me is to arbitrarily change the stakes at any time. Because, of course, as people know, the two universes we're dealing with are the cartoon universe and the human grounded reality universe. And it's even though, they play with it and blur the line because that's the ultimate threat, right? Is dip, which represents the real stakes that normally exist in a grounded reality invading the Toon universe. But the status quo, before it gets upset, is a reality where you're trying to do a movie that feels exciting, but kids won't get too scared. And I think it's kind of brilliant that it's like, cartoons, no stakes. Everyone can get hit by an anvil and they're still fine. But it's a little tense because Bob Hoskins is real and he has a drinking problem, but it's not that dark. I think the movie really rides that line of being an exciting romp in part because it has two lanes to play in. And it's almost like a classic straight man, zany man bit. I mean, it is, of course, it's the Odd Couple cop thing with Hoskins and Roger. But, I mean, the entire universes are that. Like, you rarely get a multiverse where there's only two, primarily. Although, as Adam said, a lot is implied. But anyway. And one, like, the entire Looney Tunes universe is I think you should leave guy, right? And
Right.
the entire human world in this is the straight man going, Jesus Christ. Like, obviously it's intentional that Bob Hoskins starts not liking tunes, not thinking it's funny, which makes it even funnier. That's how I think they use it.
It's great.
Mhm. Abe, did it get you hard? Is that how
did that argument stimulate
Did that
you?
argument-
Did the movie know? Is that how they use the multiverse to stroke your taint?
yeah, I think kind of to reflect what you're saying, the movie is truly stuck between two worlds, like the presentational, like you're saying, the Disney style, wholesome kids entertainment that tunes work in by day, and then like the dark underbelly of crime, drugs, sex, and that they work in by night. So it's like most film noirs, which places into two different worlds, much like the world of a teenager between child innocence and depravity, possibly in adult life. I felt that kind of loneliness before crossing the threshold with Rachel. Am I doing this right? Is this somehow hurting her? All the stories we'd been told about sex being wrong somehow our whole lives in an attempt to keep us from it. What makes now a good time to have sex? I remember thinking.
What makes now a good time to talk about it?
Yeah.
Sorry,
you know?
go on.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
imagine Roger Rabbit found himself in an impossible situation where he felt threatened into submission
Sure.
by the hegemony that was the studio system.
Kind of like
And
your
having a
podcast
friend like Bob
hosts.
Hoskins who helped free him from that like self-torture probably felt a lot like how I felt when Rachel took my flower and sweat collected across our pubescent bodies.
Did you know?
First of all,
When you-
I don't know if I need that kind of detail.
Do you know my adopted sister's name is Jorgensen? Is this an attack on me?
Yeah.
Was there
No,
something
that's probably
intentionally?
just that's
a coincidence?
probably
Probably a
just
coincidence.
probably just a
I
coincidence.
enjoy the vividness with which you recollect this. This circumstance.
Every time I watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I cannot help but think about it.
yeah,
It almost sounds prepared, but I know it's not.
it almost
No,
does.
But that just means, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It almost
It's
sounds beautifully
real.
prosaic.
It's so real.
Yeah,
Well, he's casting
Yeah.
himself back to that moment. So
I've had a lot
vividly.
of time to think about it.
I understand. And some words come unbidden from your lips. I get it.
Adam, do you think this movie does anything interesting with
I
the
do.
multiverse?
I had two things struck me about it. The first is what's interesting about two universes that merge, which I think you can say mostly because we go through the tunnel into Toontown, that Toontown actually is a fusing universe with what we'll call the normal universe, right? Is that inevitably we have a problem with like rules, like the two universes don't work the exact same way, and so all movies are trying to figure out like which rule set wins, which version of reality is the one that trumps the other, like in a great Magic the Gathering card playing sort of way. And what's interesting is they decided the Toon universe is the one that sort of supersedes in terms of reality breaking ours. Like basically anytime a tune is involved in a scene, the reality will always cater to the tune's way that matter and physics and just every other piece of reality works. So that way when a human being actually goes into the Toon universe, they can become fully a tune themselves in terms of physics and everything else. So that's interesting. I kind of want to talk about how do universes sort of trump each other, like their rules. I think that's kind of interesting. The second thing is I think there's a really obvious, though potentially unintended, metaphor about the multiverse here, which is the tunes are clearly the elite class in this world insofar as they are entertainers.
Interesting.
They are the
I
entertainment.
think of them as slaves.
I know that's what they
Right.
want you to think, Mike, but they are not that. They are not that because they all work for a large profit in the entertainment industry, and they are not bound by the rules of physics or money or food or any of
The
that stuff.
physics thing I see as a huge, of course, like they're immortal. I can
They're
see
immortal.
that argument. By
Correct.
the way, we're past the multi-map.
Okay.
That's fair enough.
Let me
But
finish
they are
my point
enslaved. They're treated like shit.
though. Well,
throughout.
that I would argue that's not actually true. For a lot of reasons. They're treated like shit in the sense that they're treated like entertainers, but they also enjoy it. which I know sounds like a kind of a dark road.
They're not allowed certain places. Like the metaphor is clearly
I think the
segregation.
metaphor is actually the opposite by accident, though, is what I'm saying. I think because the tunes always dominate every place they're in terms of like the rules always cater to them, they actually are the ruling class of this world.
And they're like the obnoxious wherever they go.
Correct.
Society has to conform
Correct.
to them. That's
exactly.
I don't think that's the intent.
I don't think it's the intent either.
Take.
I think they're accidentally reinforcing Hollywood elitism here. Like that's what's actually happening, is that this is a film that sort of says, like, let's have some pity on these poor celebrities who, sometimes are subjected to the ridicules and pain of public perception that they don't deserve. It's a very like status quo arguing movie, which is really interesting in the sense that it's a noir film, which is almost always a social satire. And this is the exact opposite. And so that's kind of interesting, because I think what it means in terms of metaverse is, again, because the toon world always dominates the other world, there's a way of talking about each universe as a kind of class system. And again, the elite's world always dominates and supersedes the lower class. So there's a bit of a classism thing going on here, I would argue.
Interesting that Doom infiltrates human society and becomes a judge. Okay.
But he still operates like a toon. His logic is like a toon. His he's so great, right? Like Christopher Lloyd kills it. But he is fundamentally a toon in every way, except for he has actual skin.
All right. I'm in the middle of saying all of that belongs in the next section.
Yeah.
Which is called, someone help me out.
Verses on verses.
Yeah. Totally find that fascinating. It is a movie of the kind that I usually go really hard on, which is like, isn't Hollywood magic grand? I mean, it ends with, to put a spin on it to support Adam's take, smile, darn you, smile. Like, it's like the toon world, they get ownership of the world at the end and they invade and tear down the wall. It is a fun lens. But I will say it's the railroad to Hollywood magic that actually makes me admire Hollywood magic. And I think that's because it's practical effects driven. Like the idea, I think a lot of people our age may have seen the behind the scenes footage of how they do the complicated sequence where they're washing dishes in handcuffs. All the bits are very competent Looney Tune bits also, I think, like with strong game premises. Yeah. Lights swing and cast shadows. The weasel gets sprayed with water splashes without a hand there. And they did it with like a series of pipes, getting pushed up and down and spraying when they need to. It's just really awesome shit. And I won't dig too much into it because every case is like that, where you're like, there's this effect and they did it and it was really hard, and you can look into it yourself. But I'm just saying, I think that adds to, La La Land fulfills that and I hated that, but maybe it's just because I like cartoons. But I'm saying this is one of the few that gets me, even though Adam did successfully pull back the veneer and be like, it still is Hollywood saying, isn't Hollywood great? And like brainwashing you into buying more of the product they make. That's all accurate. Like, as I just said, it's a collaboration between fucking Mickey Mouse is also in it. So Disney, Warner Brothers, like it's nuts, so it's not a money behemoth. Like when I see the directed by Robert Zemeckis at the end, after the triumph of the final moments of this film, it really feels like him saying, I did it. They trusted me with the money boat. I'm the captain of the money boat. Like, I don't know. I just really got that impression this time, knowing how the industry works. It is a huge flex to direct a movie like this, right? It's akin to directing the Avengers. It's like the quaint back in the day version of directing the Avengers.
Yeah, this feels like the equivalent of being asked to direct a Mel Brooks film or something, right? Like that's such a, I know that's obviously only Mel Brooks would do that, but like Mel Brooks films have this like in Hollywood cachet, like they all love them so much. This feels like
very
an insular
inside
project.
Baseball.
Yeah. And I think that's half of the appeal of it, right? That's why it's a noir film, because that's another genre that Hollywood likes more than I think the average American movie audience does.
But I do think the other half of the appeal is it's competently made. Like the noir
Yeah, it
is legit.
Yeah.
They lay the pipe about LA has good public transportation. Now it doesn't. We know that as people sitting in the present, and they're like, this is the story of how that all got fucked up. I actually was like, that's a more solid noir plot than I recall.
Right. They lay the pipe for a lot of things.
Oh, God, I opened
boy.
them up.
Oh, boy.
But, well, actually, I wanted to kind of touch back on what Adam was saying in your reaction thing about Toontown, because I kind of do agree that it's a metaphor about the unjust creation of a town for like a second-class citizen. But I do see your point about how society caters for them because they're larger than life. They're
Well,
gods.
their physics beats your physics.
Exactly.
Right. But one thing I do think that's important from a Hollywood perspective, from a, when you're writing the screenplay, is that they went so far and they're so good when you really lay down the beats about like Bob Hoskins' hatred towards Toons, how like the certain specifics that Toons have to like survive day to day makes us as the audience root for non-humans. And that's a hard thing. And it's the way in which they did it is they did it by showing the plight early in the screenplay. Now, much of that I missed because Rachel and I were doing mostly mouse stuff during all of Act One. So I can't
Mouse
speak to
stuff. Oh, good. Oh, mouths.
No.
I'm sorry. I thought you said mouse stuff, like Mickey stuff, and I was like, "What's
Mouse
Mickey? What's
stuff, yeah.
Mickey's thing, man?"
it. That was Act Two.
I see. I got you.
Man, I thought it was interesting because when Mickey and Bugs are falling from the airplane alongside him, telling him he's fucked, right? Bugs Bunny has a character and a bit that's so, like, as every Looney Tune does. It's always striking to me when they try to deploy Mickey in a movie where he's supposed to be actually funny, and it reveals that, from like a comedic math perspective, Mickey Mouse is nothing. Like, he has the least substance of any icon I'm aware of that's that big. He doesn't have even a bit. Like, I don't know what his character is. He's just friendly.
I think the last time we had a personality for Mickey, it was Fantasia. And I think they've kind of stuck with that. Like, he means well, but he goes too far. That's maybe the thing he does. And otherwise,
they were
guy.
Too curious for his own good, I guess, is his one bit. Because that's really inoffensive. That's true. They were clearly told to push Fantasia, by the way.
Absolutely.
Like, Fantasia just came out. Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, that's all time period, right? Another interesting thing about the time period is they are kind of doing they are doing some Nazi stuff in this movie that is
here
not.
we go.
Oh yeah.
Well,
you mean Doom? Yeah.
Well, Doom is very clearly inspired by Nazi
like
judge.
an SS.
Well,
Mengele.
another interesting thing about it is in the script, the dip was called The Final Solution.
Oh God.
Yes, and they removed that.
Is also a funny pun, I gotta say.
It's a good. Yes, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's a solution.
I'm kind of wondering if they didn't want to trace too many of the parallels for it to be, you know what I mean? Like, so they kind of dialed it back. But it's very clearly like they were trying to draw the parallels between the Nazi regime and the Toons.
But I agree that ultimately, like, I'm glad they cut that. What a frivolous.
Yeah.
The connection is not there. It's not the plight of the Holocaust.
No, not
by
at all.
any means.
Not at
let's
all.
not bring that into it.
They kind of wink at it a little bit though. It's an interesting it's an interesting tactic,
As everyone our age has mentioned, Christopher Lloyd as Judge Doom, super scary by if the pendulum swings back and forth, we're getting back to some scary. I'm thinking of the new Puss in Boots, and everyone remarked on how genuinely scary the wolf with the hooks is. And it goes back and forth. But this is an example that I know many of my friends cite as Judge Doom was pretty scary for considering the age range that this was aimed at. Pretty fucking grotesque and disturbing. Good job, Christopher Lloyd.
He also operates in a way that is entirely without rules. Like if there's one character that is not bound to reality at all, it's him. Oh God, dude. Yeah, go ahead. First of all, who does he report to? Nobody. He has almost infinite money. He has
exactly.
He can appear as a Toon or not. He has nominated.
He says, "Don't worry, the rabbit won't get far. My men will find him." Since when do judges have men?
Right. It's like, I know what we're doing is like sort of pointing out plot holes, but I actually think it's interesting that in this world of tunes, there was a power vacuum that this guy single-handedly sucked up, and nobody had anything to say about it. And he managed to do it by appearing as like kind of a bridge between these two classes. You know what I mean?
And
Like,
taking control of, well, ultimately colluding to like build the highway through Toontown and becoming the noir villain. Also, he claims he wants to, this is a quote, like his whole thing. The reason he wants to destroy Toontown, in fact, is to rein in insanity. Like he prefers profit and greed and human, like reality. But his men are weasels in colorful zoot suits.
Exactly.
And one is literally in a straitjacket, and he sends them out. He's literally unleashing insanity. Like, where does he get off? Anyway, I just thought that was hilarious, considering that he says, I want to rein in insanity.
Right.
Go,
Also,
crazy weasel.
He's a judge who doesn't do court stuff. He just goes around executing people.
Goes around executing
That's all he
people.
does.
Yeah.
It's
And like
"I'll
people
kill you."
who... in this system, we're led to believe are respected actors who appear on TV and stuff. And he's like, I'll murder that one.
Well, it's kind of interesting to me. Well, and also he murders them for no reason. It's kind of interesting to me that the only punishment that can be executed on a tune is just utter destruction. And it comes in a completely arbitrary way. Like either you're full tune and life is great, or you get killed, and it's completely arbitrary why it happens.
Because nothing can kill you. So if one thing can kill you, that's all it can do, right?
Well, but that's their system of justice. Again, sort of reinforcing the idea, like this is Hollywood justice, right? Like where you're either sort of beloved because you're part of this class, or very suddenly and somewhat arbitrarily, you're gone, forgotten forever. I think that's actually intentional. I really do. I think that parallel they're making on purpose.
Do you think it's about that? I don't know. The golden age of cartoons going away, or is it not that deep?
I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a lot of nods to stuff,
Sure.
but I don't know that, like, I don't know if it's that deep exactly, because I want to say there's also other, maybe you're right though, because they're bringing in a lot of other like ancillary cartoon types that we forgot about, like Betty Boop,
Classics.
like Droopy, like Woody Woodpecker. Like,
I mean, it is an ode to Hollywood, right? And nostalgic, dripping with nostalgia just in the themes, right? He misses his dead brother. It was better when he was alive. They did like cartoons. The past is better. There was public transportation in the past. We're comparing that in our minds with traffic jams now. It's highly nostalgic, obviously. It's kind of like Ready Player One of its era in some ways.
Well, it's on the cusp of something new, right? Like it truly is about the worry about the downfall of the golden era of animation, and kind of a throwback to those things. And it's much like the worry I had if Rachel Jorgensen was being satisfied by the actions I was doing that night. I was so young and driven by my own lust, but like, what of hers? I remember asking her after, and she said it was fine. And I remember feeling pride in that moment about it being fine.
From Fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
I felt like a real teenage Adonis.
Good for you.
It brought me the confidence I needed to bring my sexual game to other women later and leave them satisfied in an adequate way.
Oh, yeah, which you've famously done.
Yes.
So
Famously adequate.
much. Yeah.
Abe Epperson.
Did you just add your name to the end of that quote?
Yeah, he signed off on
right?
his own quote. I really appreciate that.
Okay. I also wanted to make sure we got into the idea of the implication of all these tunes. So even Looney Tunes itself, right? They had the sheepdog and the wolf who clock out. So the tunes have always played with the idea of winking at the audience. What if tunes are real? What if tunes are real?
Right.
But this one introduced the idea. I guess there's a Bugs Bunny that shows the animator, but regardless, in Roger Rabbit, Jessica Rabbit famously says, "I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way." So does that mean that the tunes all exist? Like, are there animators in this universe? And I guess there are, because the dip is made of acetone, which would dissolve cells. So can humans give life to whenever they want by doodling? Does any doodle that a kid draws on a placemat come to life?
Yeah.
Can they be trapped? Like, is Jessica saying that she can have a different like personality inside than the way she's drawn on the outside? Like, what about Spawn the animated series? Is he knocking around? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a big problem,
Could you just draw whatever you want just
Geiger
to exploit
exists,
it? Yeah.
you know?
Could you draw like a sex slave robot and it goes, oh no, as soon as it comes to life? I just want to know how it all works.
Well, and also, yeah,
I just want my sex slave cartoon robot.
it's sort of the plight of the AI, right? Like that question creates the AI plot dilemma where like suddenly the creature we've made takes on a life of its own and rises up in rebellion, right? Like that's why Judge Doom exists at all, is to prevent that from happening. You know, because they are clearly more powerful than us. I don't know the answer. They scrupulously avoid the implication of animators or studios that created these characters at all. You know what I mean? Like they don't reference it at all, other than like sort of cute. Right. They sort of are implying that they all sort of punch in and punch out like regular actors might. Right? So I don't know. But I accept that problem. I think it's implied. I accept that problem as being real for sure.
Right.
Interesting.
Only real insofar as you do the correct thing. Obviously, you can say it doesn't matter. And it doesn't, unless it's interesting. And I actually do think it's interesting in that case. But I just think it's really a good screenplay to teach you basic screenplay structure and wants and plant payoff. I appreciate, and which is something I also appreciate about Princess Bride. Like the big thing I took away this time that I was like, that's so actually clean and elegant and brilliant, is that first Eddie hates tunes, obviously. But then the first time Roger and Eddie ever have to work together to resolve an obstacle, it's, of course, when they're hiding from Doom in the tavern, the shave and a haircut bit. And he realizes that he can give Roger a drink and make him explode, right? And it's basically Eddie being forced against his will to work with Roger as a cartoon comedy duo for the first time. And that happens several more times, escalating to the fact that at the end, Roger's tied up, and to save him, Eddie has to solo himself do an entire cartoon routine so funny that all the bad guys die of laughter. I actually do think that is kind of elegant and brilliant escalation in the sense that it was so smart to tie Roger up, right? It makes sense. It's not complicated, but it's effective and satisfying. Like, oh, he has to be full-on cartoon now alone. And it ends with Roger telling him like, wow, you crushed it. And him being pleased by that. Like, that's as far as you can go from hating tunes before. And I do like the efficiency of that.
Knowing that, I just want you to consider, if you will, all the people they offered that role to before Bob Hoskins.
Oh, he's
was
so
the one.
Good.
He's good at it. I agree. He's really good at it. Their first choice was Harrison Ford, who turned it down because it was too. They turned him down because he was too expensive.
I think he could have been grumpy funny. I don't know if he could have done the cartoon.
The song part is
the
funny part of it. Chevy Chase was their second. That makes sense, but he didn't want to do it.
Yeah. DeVito
Bill Murray didn't take it. Eddie Murphy passed on it because he misunderstood it. Then here's a list of people that they thought about: Robin Williams, Robert Redford, Jack Nicholson, Sylvester Stallone, Edward James Olmos, Wallace Shawn, Ed Harris, Charles Grodin, and Don Lane. All of those, just imagining any of those people doing that last bit that you just mentioned blows my mind. I don't even know what that
Jack
means.
Nicholson,
That's true.
By
the way, after you fucked Rachel Jorgensen, Abe, did you do a cartoonish dance to celebrate?
Yeah. Yes.
No, but what you said earlier about being tied up and going solo, that does reminisce.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. That's all we get.
Okay,
We don't
all
get
right.
more details. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a special moment that I'm not going to reveal
just
all of the
creepy
secrets.
implications, which is like, I just love, like, who drew Judge Doom? What was
Yeah,
he drawn
right.
to do? Who made that cartoon? Was that drawn by like some kid who then had his parents called for like a frank discussion? You know, like
Right.
he's like a fucking Johnny the Homicidal Maniac cartoon. Also, since you never see him, like you only see his eyes and hands as cartoon, I like to think that it's really Christopher Lloyd's skin and underneath it's Marcel the Shell with shoes on.
Aw,
Mm-hmm. Pretty cute.
that's cute.
Pretty cute.
That's really
By the way,
cute.
Tim Curry auditioned for that role, and they thought he was too
That-
scary.
Too scary.
Too scary.
I could see
Yes.
that depending on what point in his career it is, but man, I would have loved that. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think Christopher Lloyd is the best part of the movie. Like, as far as performance, his performance is amazing.
Yeah. I don't need to argue about it, but
Yeah.
I like Hoskins. I really like it.
I like Hoskins too. Abe, was your sexual climax anything like Roger Rabbit's drinking climax?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Oh, the
exactly
train whistle.
The same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just wanted to
and-
imagine that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know that both of you guys were wondering about what happens.
Yeah, what's
after,
your
and-
O situation? How do you blow your stack?
Can
dude?
you get there?
Describe it.
Well, I won't speak to the O situation, but I will say that in
All
the
right.
pale quiet of our afterglow, breathing deeply, satisfied and confused as the act had ravished our agency, we were powerless to its desire. We laid naked, cuddling, and discussing how we didn't feel different, a boy and a girl, aged 17 years, wondering if we were now man and woman. Would we be able to see, people be able to see through our attempts to keep our coupling quiet? Would the nature of our friendship change? Would it affect the friend circle? We were both too scared to consider what we could be open with. Maybe we would become boyfriend and girlfriend for all the world to see. But we were ill-equipped and immature, even though our bodies knew it was right.
Are you journaling? What-
Yeah,
what
are
is
you
this?
Fred Savage in?
Yeah. Is it what
This is
would you
Wonder
do?
Years.
Although you do remind me of two jokes in this, way dirtier than I thought there would be. Of course, the Jessica Rabbit,
Yeah,
who I
Amazing.
always thought, even as a kid, the thinness of her waist is actually disturbing or like anti-sexy, but drawn to be super sexy, obviously. But there's so like a magnet for dirty jokes. But there's two where I was like, that's very dirty if I'm reading that right. One is, come on home, Roger, I'll bake you a carrot cake. Like the carrot's his dick, right? The cake is her cake. I imagine.
absolutely.
Okay, I
that
can
a stretch?
accept.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one that, because cake is a new term, I'll give you that. But the one that can't be a stretch is the first time Eddie Valiant, Bob Hoskins, shows that he's attracted to her, even though he's human, right? At the club. She says, "Are you dabbling in watercolors, Eddie?" Or like, sorry, the secretary comes in and says, "Are you dabbling in watercolors, Eddie?" Does this not imply that he's making Jessica Rabbit wet? This is the joke.
Yeah.
I think this is the
he's
joke.
putting
Okay,
his dick, which is a brush.
which is a brush, and
into
making her wet. She's
her
the
watercolors.
color. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's turning her from a cartoon into water.
I'll be
That's
honest with you,
all.
I didn't put that together. That one kind of swept right over me.
It's like the
so-
fingerprints thing in Animaniacs.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's exactly
Well,
right.
that's a little more
Yeah.
obvious.
Can I mention some things that are so? One interesting thing about this is that it might be the movie that's like the Kevin Bacon for all universes. Like Roger Rabbit might be the one that's like every universe is linked because of it.
Well, you
this
got
movie.
Bugs Bunny. That gives you Space Jam.
Yes.
Space Jam gives you that entire catalog because they're all in
Correct.
the stadium. Yeah.
and it later and because we have
it gives
Disney,
you Pennywise.
we have Marvel and The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And like
It's all
you know,
unraveling.
right. This one actually kind of does make every universe connected, except that
fun.
there are very funny omissions from the animation circle that they couldn't get the rights to that are therefore excluded. Things like Popeye, like they couldn't get Popeye.
Even
Popeye's
though
not
the
this
opening
universe.
cartoon with Baby Herman is a Popeye cartoon. Like it's the exact premise of Baby's Day Out with Sweet Pea.
That's right, but they could not get the actual characters from that.
Right.
They couldn't get Felix the Cat. They couldn't get Mighty Mouse, and just a few
They
others.
did get
that-
a Fleischer though, Betty Boop. I actually
Yes.
thought it was odd By the way, she has a hilarious bit, I think, which is that she goes like, I still got it. And he goes, sure you do. Like she's pathetic and broken down. I think that's very funny. You still got it. Yeah. But sorry, I forgot where I was going. But I remember. I actually still find it odd that there's Bugs Bunny and Roger Rabbit. He seems like a Bugs Bunny sound-alike. It's weird that they both exist.
I would not be surprised if the reason that Roger Rabbit I mean, I know there's a book, but the reason that they decided to stick with Roger Rabbit is because they weren't sure if they could get the rights to Bugs.
For like this does feel like role, the whole movie.
It does feel like it would be ideally a Bugs Bunny role in some ways. I mean, maybe that's just my opinion because Roger Rabbit is a more forgettable character than Bugs Bunny to me.
Well, Hoskins even says the joke, which is a Bugs Bunny reference. Not that can't. Anyway, they're torturing him, and they're like, "Where's Roger?" And he's like, have you checked Cucamonga? Have you been to Walla Walla's good this time of year? Which is an old Bugs Bunny joke if you're not familiar.
I see. Maybe I just don't have the proper lexicon to appreciate.
I should have taken a left at Albuquerque.
Yeah. Absolutely. Also, Terry Gilliam refused to direct this because he was lazy.
It's hard to direct. Okay, I'm gonna rattle off just some effects because I didn't want to get bogged down. Roger as a cartoon zooms through a live action window and there's a him-shaped hole, Looney Tunes style. Very effective effect. And they flex when they don't need to. There's a scene where Jessica Rabbit is sultry and talking to Bob Hoskins, and she holds up a live action mirror to catch Hoskins in the shot, which must have been like hanging from wires, I guess. Right. There's the famous bit where Roger smashes plates onto his own head.
Yeah,
so
that
the
was
plates
incredible.
Lift up into the air and smash, and lift up into the air and smash. Obviously, some kind of machine or contraption. There's the bit where there's like a gun from the from the Pistol Packin' Possum poster, and in the glass of the poster is reflected the live action gun being held by a cartoon weasel hand. Very complicated. And then there's the bit in live action where Eddie Valiant falls out of a building, but his hat stays in place and spins around on a central point like a cartoon, and then his hands reach up from out of frame and grab it. I thought that through a lot, and that's like a cool rig.
That feels like just a prop hat.
Yeah, a spinning hat.
It's really impressive. Pad. You know what really stood out to critics about about this movie? The opening animation sequence. More than the stunts.
CG. That's right. I forgot to even mention there's a little bit of CG in this, but it was one of the first. Yeah.
That's right. They took them 9 months to create that opening cartoon.
I remember my dad was blown away, or like he read a Phantasmagoria spread about it and was like, this is going to be crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny just because like that's the thing that when you watch it now is less impressive because we're so used to the technology they have now, so it's not as easy to conceive of how hard it is. That's literally that's what all the critics were raving about that stuff.
Right, the human director walks into frame on a fucking cartoon.
Right,
like this was the first time we saw that, and I do think that's worth stating. That's awesome. Like it harkens back to, and it's not really the first time. There was a really old, like 1920s thing. I forget what it's called, like Dinky the Dinosaur or some shit. Mm-hmm. But there was this thing where a composite live action guy would interact with an animated dinosaur, and it would just be like 1 minute bits, and you'd pay 2 bits to go see it.
It was the first time for me.
Oh.
Everybody shut up. He's doing it.
I mean, I'm ready for his Yates like something.
I was just
narrative.
saying, you were like, it wasn't the first time. It was the first time for me is all I'm saying.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. I thought we were going to get more.
Did it take you the length of the whole movie? Like, did the sexual encounter last that long?
That's a great question.
Yeah. The entire movie.
Wow, dude. Wow.
Yeah.
With that length, I have to imagine you explored. Like, did things get open-minded at all for your first time?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think I thought a lot during the whole time.
Yeah,
I
they
thought
love that.
I thought about how it's an unlikely pairing, much like the unlikely pairing between Bob Hoskins and Roger. You know, I felt ill-equipped a little bit, but like, you know, me and Rachel, we traveled in similar circles, yes, but I was a jock and she was a nerd. We didn't have much to talk about. I guess when you're that age, hormones do the talking, and
it's really solving a Capulet Montague problem. Yeah,
boy, oh boy. Those hormonal conversations continued for several months, and then once more, the first summer we both came back from college.
Oh, so this was not the last time that
now
you guys...
it's a Death Cab for Cutie song, and I've lost interest.
That's great. Oh no, I have more interest now.
And much like, you know, you unlikely pairs do work, you know. Case in point, this movie ends with Bob and Roger kissing over the gooey corpse of their enemy.
That's what I'm saying.
To prove that they are laughy guys who can have a good time now.
Yeah.
Which this time I was like, this ending is actually crazy. Human cops arrive at the scene. A judge is dead, who they believe to be human up to this point. He's melted. And Bob Hoskins, who's not a cop, he's a private detective, is like, it's all wrapped up, fellas. And they're like, okay.
It makes me think that the judge never had any real authority because they're not really allowed to do anything to tunes. Again, like
I wonder who he really was. Well, he wasn't a rabbit or a duck or a pussy is all that's said of him.
That's right. Abe, can I ask you just one, other question? So like now when you watch a Bugs Bunny cartoon, what's that experience like?
Dear Nips, ping.
Yeah, yeah. Have you Caligulated yourself here?
It's not the same at all.
Okay.
Why would it be?
What about when you watch Roger Rabbit?
You're right.
Yeah, you're weird.
Yeah, okay.
Did this all come flooding back to you when you watched the movie to cover it?
Yeah.
How was that experience?
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay.
It was like a dip hose of memory all over
fond memories. What I did remember is after the aftermath, of our teenage rendezvous was that quiet car ride back to her place to drop her off. It was awkward, but not in the way I think we both felt like victims or anything. Just changed, kind of like what you said with the our bodies over the goo. I think of sometimes in a way, isn't losing your virginity like staining?
It's gaining your goo.
Staining anew and looking down at your gooey child corpse. So we were changed and we didn't know where to go from there. Where were we? Now where are we? Like to have this one type of conversation for the rest of our friendship, that of endless pounding and impressive athleticism. Quieting all aspects of our relationship.
Impressive athleticism. Can you elucidate that?
We're teens. We're teens with our teenage
endurance.
Yeah, I couldn't do half the stuff I could do when I was that age.
Sure.
But I really was thinking, since you asked about the end of it, would our Rachel and I's goofy conversations about music or art or whatever be just silenced by this new passion? I don't know. We didn't know, and we weren't mature enough to immediately get past it, much like Roger Rabbit when he believed that Jessica Rabbit was having an affair.
Why make a sound when you can make a pound?
It's interesting.
Shut up and nut up.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you?
I'm not over the fact that you drove her to your house and then drove her home. Like you didn't because you didn't ask her to drive over.
She's not welcome. Not welcome.
I explained. My parents were in Moraga, California, visiting with my aunt and uncle.
Right.
Limited time window. You know how it is when you're a teen.
Better for you to do all the driving.
Gotta knock it out at Roger Rabbit. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally understand.
We couldn't just do that kind of thing in public. That's untoward.
Well, those aren't the only options, but fair enough. I can accept that. That's fine.
What are we gonna just do it out in the street? You fucking monster.
I don't know.
God, I wish he was telling us about Sorcerer of Gogolblarn or whatever the fuck it was.
I got a feeling that's kind of where this idea started.
Yeah.
Did you know this movie won a ton of Academy Awards?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, it should, the technical ones at least,
yes.
But what else?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. So it won editing, it won sound effects, it won visual effects, and they gave a special achievement award to the director of the animation, which is kind of interesting.
Good for him.
Zemeckis didn't direct the animation pieces.
Well, they're good. They're very, in fact, it has that problem where I think in the first sequence, it's over animated, where you're like, this doesn't remind me of Looney Tunes because it is too effortful. I mean, not that I call it a problem, but I just noted that I'm like, the opening cartoon looks better than Looney Tunes in a way that actually makes it look different than Looney Tunes, you know?
Yeah, I think that it became a sort of problem for the movie that the opening cartoon was such a big deal. Like that's.
I agree. It's not that important. It's just all it is supposed to introduce you to the hybridization that we're gonna enjoy. Yeah, it almost would have been nice if it started with a beat before that established that this is a noir, and then cut to cartoon, and you're like, why the fuck are we watching a cartoon now? That could have been cool.
Right.
Also, so I think cartoon violence being real is very funny. Abe and I once were asked to pitch to Hanna-Barbera like Adult Swim style reinventions of their characters. We had one that was based on Secret Squirrel called Agent Zero, where the government figures out how to like create cartoons and they send them to murder our enemies because they can't be killed, right? So same joke, but with Adult Swim style humor. And then in Kill Me Now, our movie, I realized we almost ripped this off. I wonder if it's subconscious, but the villain, Bob Hoskins gives a monologue that's very similar to our villain about my brother getting crushed by a piano. And I think there was a safe in this case or whatever. I gotta say, I think it would have been funny if we cut to a very graphic live action flashback of his brother's head getting exploded by a safe in slow motion.
Right.
But obviously, given the time period, it wouldn't make it in, but I wanted it.
It feels like it could have been, like, I certainly subsequent versions of this idea, like that, the Happy Time murders or whatever, understood that we want gruesome out of this.
Well, the sheer outrageousness of doing anything you would do to a cartoon to a human and having the realistic consequences is always funny to me.
And the movie knows that. It actually has a line about that, right? Like, so I agree. But this is like a step on the continuum. I don't think anybody thought you could even make a movie like this before.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like,
that's what's cool about it.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's Mary Poppins and stuff, but this definitely feels like a leap forward in a lot of ways. Yeah. The interactivity between them.
And given how there's so much desaturation these days, I really like how they are in love with color on the live action side and bring the live action world closer to a cartoon world. They sort of meet in the middle, and that's definitely a clear aesthetic choice. Reminded me a bit of Little Shop of Horrors, how everything's saturated to a degree where it's almost a heightened reality. Which I think it's a cool look.
Can I also point out, because I just want to make one last sort of pitch about the multiverse here. The Toon world is not a noir world.
No, that's the joke. It clashes.
Well, that's interesting because every version of this idea that we've seen since, and I'm going to go back to the Happy Time Murders, there's one idea.
Please don't.
Everything is a noir. I know, it's a horrible movie. Everything is in a noir pastiche. So it's interesting that even though they have all the tropes, and certainly Jessica Rabbit is a noir character to the hilt. And
there's a fake out. You thought she was bad, she's good. There's a murder. There's a will. Yeah. There's disappearing ink.
The world of the Toons, Toontown, is not impacted by the world around it. Like, it is its own always sunny world. Right? Like, there's never night in that world. Do I remember that correctly? Is there ever a night sequence in it?
That's true. And they only briefly are worried right at the end going, oh, we won't the will? Oh, no. And then they get the will within 15 minutes of expressing concern about it, which I made a note of. Like, the Toons are not allowed to really be in danger or worried, other than the judge killing people with dip. And I think that's why it stands out. He's the only force that can bring stakes to the Toon world.
Interesting. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, I think that is why I never felt like the Toons were the victims. I know they were trying to draw on other tropes, right? Like they're lesser citizens, but it just doesn't totally land for me.
Well, and they totally gloss over. Like, I don't actually understand how Doom would get away with it anyway, because his plan was to spray all of Toontown and destroy it. and they're famous, and it's a huge area with thousands of sentient beings. Like his argument is, quote, "Who has the time to worry about what happened to some talking mice when they're zooming by at 75 miles an hour? The studios and the courts, the estate of MK Maroon. Like, you're fucked, dude. It's a huge. You can't actually do that. Your plan is not going to work."
They don't seem to give a shit what he does, though.
Right? Yeah,
like,
no, they don't.
He is just running wild in this world.
Doom's doing what he wants.
He's doing whatever he wants. I'm ready to decide whether or not we're gonna stay in this universe, right?
I just want to end with 3 standout jokes I noticed this time that I'm
Sure.
like, just wow. I just really think those are good jokes, especially considering tapping into cartoon live action, and it's one of the first to do it. When he's at the cartoon club and we're trying to establish that he's exasperated with Toon Logic, and the bartender asks if he wants anything, Bob Hoskins says, "Scotch on the rocks." And I mean ice.
Yeah,
he's
ice.
really pissed off.
Yeah,
and then
they're so literal.
I like when it
making
pans
jokes.
across a newspaper and the headline is "Goofy cleared on spy charges." Like, Goofy got into some shit apparently.
Yeah.
And then I think the funniest moment in the movie, like truly top shelf delivery, editing, so good. Classic vaudeville, but like sharp. Is, the whole danger has been that they're cuffed together, and then Roger slips his handcuff out. His hand out of the handcuffs. That's not, but the perfect is the capper. "You mean to tell me you could take your hand out of that cuff at any time?" Yep. "Not any time, only when it was funny." So fucking obnoxious. It's great.
It's perfect. That line is so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah.
Classic.
Oh, Abe, yeah, sorry,
no. Speaking of jokes, how was your sex? Are we done?
I haven't talked to Rachel for many years, but that's just the way it goes. Have you talked to your firsts? I doubt it. Or some people are married to their firsts, but
yeah,
I don't know what Rachel is doing. Probably HR somewhere.
HR? Okay. Is that based on anything, or is that just how you like to remember?
That the type of person she was?
She was always good with people.
Or was she one of the few young people who says, "When I grow up, I would want to be in HR. That's what I want. That's my goal."
Post it to her Facebook wall right now. "When I was growing up, all I wanted to do is HR." Signed, Rachel Jorgensen.
Interesting you didn't look up her Facebook before this question.
Yeah, that you're doing it now.
Yeah,
she
I'm
also
doing it now.
annotates her quotes by saying her own name after things she says. I think you guys are meant for each other.
She got that from me. She definitely got
She's fighting your style, dude.
Nice to know you had an impact. Nice to know it meant something.
It is nice to know.
Yeah.
I hope it's not sexually transmitted.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. Well,
that would be hilarious.
Shall we decide whether we're going to close the wormhole on this?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think the options, just for the audience so they remember, is we can stay in this universe, we can leave this universe, or we can fuse them.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, good quote. "Yes, my dearest, it is I, and while I would love to embrace you, first I must satisfy my sense of moral outrage. I'm going to blend the universes." Scott.
Oh, wow. Hybridize.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm a huge fan of animation. As a kid, and I think still a little bit as an adult, I do wish cartoons were real. I do want cartoons to be real. I love cartoons, so I will take the risks. I feel like the 40s world just kind of cancels out, right? Because it will age into being my normal world. So I would say hybridizing Earth and the Roger Rabbit movie really just results in cartoons being real. And I think that would be dope. I think it would be cool.
Not bad.
Causes so many problems, but I'm going to let her rip and see what happens.
I'm worried that like what you've done if you keep this world is you've created a Fallout. Like a Fallout universe where like there was a moment where these two worlds intersected, and here we are 100 years later, and it's an apocalypse of like toon mayhem, because they destroy
I don't know how long
everything.
It can hold itself together. Yeah,
they destroy everything. I just don't like. You can't own property in a toon world, because what happens if a toon comes in? You can either be a bigot
Right.
and not let them in your place, or they're going to destroy everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're instinctively destructive. Like,
Yeah.
Tweety Bird pulls his fingers off the flagpole and lets him fall off the building because presumably it's a funny bit
It's
for
funny.
a cartoon.
Yeah.
Tweety, you don't know this guy. In fact, if you knew his deal, he's the good guy. Like, why did you do that? Presumably, that's just what cartoons do. They just fuck with people.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It does
Yeah.
seem to be. And also, just my last reason, I just don't want to live in a world where Abe has had sex. So
It is-
we gotta,
okay.
we gotta,
close that hole.
Yeah, we gotta close
so
that
to
wormhole.
Gotta
speak.
close
Yeah.
that hole.
Yeah.
Well, here's
Close
the
that
thing.
Rachel hole.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter because I'd also close this wormhole. It doesn't change that it happens. All right.
Yeah,
So
but you're
I'm
just
gonna
trying to
keep
hit it
this-
and quit it. You always leave the universe of whoever you bone.
That's right.
Look,
yeah.
I like to keep this movie forever only as a memory.
Okay.
It belongs in the past. My immutable yet sexy past. Because it doesn't need to come back. It's not about hitting it and quitting it. It's just a piece of my storied history, isn't it? I'm not feeling a lot of love from you guys.
What kind of love were you hoping to feel?
You had a first sex.
Yeah,
you had
was
a
it-
first sex.
Oh, you wanted it to turn into a conversation
you wanted us
about
to
that.
share.
I didn't need any of that. You can sympathize and you understand.
I still don't know
But
what
all
you're
I've gotten
asking
from
for
you
us
guys
I
to have
can't
done.
and I don't. I could, but I won't.
Yeah.
You just not very friendly this
No.
whole podcast. That's
It's
all I'm
true,
gonna
I'm
say.
not.
So,
I
Abe
guess
out.
I'm the asshole. I would have stopped it at immutable but sexy past, so let's get out of here. This is already behind the paywall, so you already know about all the bonus things you get at patreon.com/smallbeans. You can find Abe you can find us all on Twitter. Abe's Abe the Mighty. Ganzer's the real Gans with a Z, and I'm Swaim_Corp. Abe sometimes says what's coming up on the slate, but he's already out, so I think we
Yeah.
should just end it.
So now we'll never know. We'll never know. Okay, I get to get the hell out of here.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.